And we're live. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. You made it through this short Thanksgiving week. Gobble, gobble. Got some food here in the background because if you haven't eaten enough food, we thought we would remind you and show you more food. So welcome, everyone. This, of course, is the Food Safety Chat live. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group, and we do a live stream every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern on LinkedIn, YouTube, and now on Twitter as well. And we talk about all things food safety. And every week I have the pleasure of bringing in an expert to join me for the chat. And we will deep dive into a conversation of what we're seeing out there in the world of food safety and quality. And it's been a while since we've had Jose on, so I'm very happy to have Jose Sabal Food Safety Consulting back in the show. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. I was basically typing the good morning in the chat box right now. How are you doing, Bryan? How's the weather there?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yep. So we're having a very nice fall sliding into winter in Colorado. It's currently 35 degrees. So like what, 1 or 2
Oh my
C's
goodness.
here. Yeah. So for your Florida blood, yeah, cold for you, but not too bad. Not too bad, especially for this time of year.
Not too bad for you. Anything below 7, it's already dead for me.
And Stephanie, good morning. I guess good afternoon for you in a cold and foggy Germany. And Stephanie is in a beautiful area. Nice to see you, Stephanie. So, of course, I'm in Colorado, in Loveland, up kind of by Fort Collins, where Colorado State University is. I went to the University of Wyoming, and every year they have a border war, they call it, Jose. So the two schools are only about an hour apart, and they've had a long rivalry. And so for football, they play for the boot. So they have a bronze boot that they play for the championship. And Wyoming was victorious this year.
Wow.
So we beat them by 1 point, and I was able to go to the game. It's the first football game I've been to in a long time, and it was a lot of fun. So the whole family was there, and that was very neat. And Wyoming winning just makes it all that much better.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, take your victories where you can. Good morning, Cheryl. Nice to see you. So if you're new to the chat and you haven't been here before, one of the things you'll notice is we're building a community here, which is super awesome. And communicate with each other and ask your questions and interact with everybody, right? Because this is not a presentation. This is a discussion, and this is what makes it so much fun. Good afternoon. Oh, India Bakery. Wow, how cool. Sir, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your name because I know I will not get that correct. So here in the United States, this is the day after Thanksgiving, the ominous Black Friday, where companies all have their sales and people go out and buy stuff and all that kind of fun stuff. So we would rather be here talking food safety with you. So one of the things that's very interesting, I was thinking about this morning, Jose, is that this is the time of year from a food safety standpoint, right, where you actually have to be more cautious, right? Because food safety never goes away. And if you're in a manufacturing company, this is actually some of your riskier times, because when you're busy and you're really rushing to get product out the door, and this is your peak sales time, and you need to get the cheese into the stores for Thanksgiving and Christmas and things like this, things get compressed. So sanitation has to hurry, and production has to make the orders, and everybody's running around. This is when, from a food safety and food quality standpoint, you have to be hyper vigilant, because this is when the problems happen.
Yeah, 100%.
So I congratulate everybody for being here on your, in the US at least, here, your holiday week, and still paying attention to food safety. So thank you from both of us on that. And so part of that, continuing education and growth is going to conferences and things like this. I was out at the Washington State Food Safety and Sanitation Conference, speaking out there recently. And Jose, you were at a conference too, right?
I already went to the SQF, before the SQF, the FSPCA, I'm going to say /FDA annual conference, and then the SQF conference.
Gotcha. Oh, and I almost did it again, Jose. Everybody, Jeffrey, please join us as well. Join us for our morning drink, and glad you're here, everyone.
Cheers.
Very good. Very, very good. So I actually have water in my mug because I'm doing, and you can't see it in camera, but I'm doing Invisalign for my teeth. So I'm realigning my teeth. So one of the little secrets they don't tell you when you have braces when you're younger, if you have to go through that, is that even though they fixed your teeth then, guess what? They continue to move.
Yeah.
And even your face and your jaw and things. We all know that, your cartilage, your nose and your ears and stuff continues to grow as you age, which is why old people have gigantic ears, right? And your jaw, I didn't know this, your jaw grows. And so the orthodontist told me that, as you age, your jaw changes and grows, and that affects your teeth as well. And so I decided to get it done because I got quite a bit of movement down here on the lower part of my teeth. So continuous improvement is everywhere, including my teeth.
That's a good one, Bryan.
I didn't even, that was like completely impromptu off the top of my head. So what exactly is, so in quality, Jose, we have all these acronyms and, all these PCQIs and all these different types of things. What is FSPCA?
Okay, so that one stands for the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance. And this alliance was the one who received the money from FDA, a grant, I'm going to say, from FDA, in order to develop the materials, the manual, the workbook, and the models that are used during the class, and also was the one responsible for the organization of the requirements for those that will become instructors for the rules. Yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, it's quite simple.
And they're based so they're in what, Illinois? So it's through the University of Illinois, correct?
Yes, it's housed in the Illinois Institute of Technology.
Yes, there we go.
That's exactly the name. And they're the one responsible for all the documentation manuals and so on for the preventive control for human food, preventive control for animal food, FSVP for the Supplier Verification Program, and the intentional adulteration rules and manuals and so on.
Wow. So so when we were preparing for our chat here earlier this week, you had said that, wow, there was a lot of good information that came out of this conference. So one of our objectives today is to get a download from you on what you were able to learn at the conference. So one of the things that they do at these conferences, by the way, if you're ever planning to attend on one of these, recommend it, right? So it's definitely a very good conference. And you'll get some really good insight because FDA has a strong presence at this conference. And they have some very good speakers who are pretty candid, right? They'll tell you what they're thinking and how they're working on things and what's coming up. And so let's kind of take a look at that. So one of the speakers I always enjoy listening to is Glenn Bass, and he is the deputy director with the Office of Regulatory Affairs, ORA. So that's, he's one of the head guys out in the field who's managing a lot of the investigators who go out and visit your plants. And I was at FSPCA a few years ago, and he gave a presentation. And during that presentation, Jose, he said something that made my jaw drop. And I couldn't believe what he was saying, right? He gave a great presentation. And then he said, very candidly, it's like, hey, listen, we're learning all these rules and regulations and how to enforce this correctly, just like you are. And if you're going through an inspection with one of my investigators out in the field, and things aren't going right, or you disagree with what they say, call me.
Yes.
And I was like, what? And he handed out his business cards, and he wrote his cell number on his business card. I was just like, wow, that's amazing, right? And so it kind of shows, and it was a refreshing attitude, right? Of, hey, listen, we're not perfect. We like to pretend we are, right? We all do. And for him to say that and admit that was very impressive. And I liked him from that point forward. Yep.
And exactly the same experience. I have that exact same experience, Bryan. I don't recall if it was the first one or the second annual conference. We have exactly the same thing. He said, if you feel that inspector or investigator is not fair, call me.
Yeah. And I think coming out of that too, one of the best things that FDA did relative to reorganization of how they're looking at things is, it used to be that in a particular district, within a region where you had a person in charge of that, so like Glenn in this example, they would have a pool of investigators, and they would be assigned to things in that local area. And as a result of that, it used to be in the past, and at my food plants when I was running quality at the company, you would get investigators coming in who had no experience in food, right? So there was one investigator who would come into one of our plants out of Roanoke who was a medical device expert. And so he would come in and audit food plants, and he had he wanted us to be a medical device company because that was his framework. And it made for very difficult audits. And FDA changed that model and said, no, we want to change this around. It's going to mean more travel. It's going to require adjustment, but we want people who are trained in food auditing food and people who are trained in medical device doing medical device. And it's like, it sounds like common sense, but that was a major shift for FDA. And I think things have improved a lot because of that.
Yeah. So his presentation was, like always, amazing. Okay. He basically went through I will say quite detailed explanation about what was the outcome of the inspections and investigations performed during the pandemic and what is coming. And as expected, Bryan, because this is something that you and me have been discussing many times in our previous chats, we can expect that the amount of inspections of the FDA are going to increase, but I mean significantly. Okay,
yes. Oh,
that is a very reasonable expectation. I was getting ready for this chat, Bryan. I was looking into the portal, the dashboard of the FDA for the inspections. And one thing that amazed me is that in 2000, I believe it was 12 or 9, I don't recall exactly, but I mean, lots of years ago, FDA was performing 14,000 inspections in a year.
Wow.
Last year they performed 4,000, and it was a significant increase from the year before.
Yeah.
So we can expect that is going that way. Now, the other thing that was part of that conversation, which is, makes me wonder, the outcome of the future inspections is that FDA is planning on using something that is called the remote regulatory assessments. And that is fundamentally a virtual audit. They are going to send you most likely an email. Hey, hello, this is the FDA. Hey, by the way, I need to say that is a voluntary. Okay, so the company may say, nope, I don't want to do that. You're more than welcome to come here and visit me, but I don't want to do that. Companies have the right. Okay. If you ask me, I mean, I have let's say that I own a food facility and the FDA calls or sends an email. Hey, we want to perform our remote regulatory assessment. Oh my goodness. I know that it says that it's voluntary, but can you tell the FDA, no, we don't want to do that? That is kind of an uphill answer, very uphill.
Yeah, definitely. That puts a lot of pressure on you.
A lot. So I will say that if we fully understand all of the requirements of the FDA in each and every single element of the regulation, and we have a system that we have no issue, well, I just don't care if you want to perform a remote regulatory assessment or not, because I'm ready. That's my point. And I believe that if I'm the FDA right now and I contact someone, I'm going to contact you, Bryan. Hey, Bryan, do you want to participate in this remote regulatory assessment? And you say, I have no problem. Let me know when and where, and I'll be there. And you just have a Zoom meeting, a Teams meeting, and something, and you just share the documentation. You're open with the FDA. Guess what? That is going to be, very nice for the company.
Yeah. Well, and two,
you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. If you're thinking of going down this path, right, and you're going to get this call from FDA, you need to prepare for this, right? So you need to completely change how you are looking at doing your audits with FDA. And so it's like, okay, here is my plans and my procedures of how I will do an in-person FDA inspection if they show up at my door, and you need to practice and train that. Now you also need to practice and train how you're going to do one of these remote regulatory assessments too.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I heard from during the SQF conference that the code is not going to remove the remote audits. Okay. They're going to remain as an option.
Really?
Maybe they are not going to be used a lot, but they are going to remain there.
Interesting.
So at the end, Bryan, what we can predict for the future or foresee that it's going to happen are remote assessments.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that is going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is kind of what Glenn talked about in his presentation too, and we'll dive into this more, is foreign supplier verification, right? It's written into the regulations to do remote audits, right? And under FSMA, Congress mandated a certain number of inspections that FDA has to do. And I think that's why it's pushing in this direction, Jose, is because FDA is like, we have limited resources. Travel takes a ton of time. It dedicates a lot of resources. You know, this whole remote thing ain't too bad, right?
And you know what, Bryan? The second topic that we have in our agenda, the conversation about the FSBP update. So now look at this. The remote assessments in FSBP are part of the regulation. Those are not voluntary. When the FDA says, show me the documentation online or ship me the document, that is a mandatory thing. There is no way that you can say, oh, no, I don't want, you can come here, but I'm not going to send you those documents. It's not an option.
No, it is not.
That's the difference between the remote regulatory assessment and the FSBP assessment.
Yes, absolutely.
That one is mandatory. Now look at this. They provided a guidance document and they're performing a lot of this assessment. What was the outcome in 2021? I was looking at the data from FDA data dashboard. 27% of all of the inspections performed in 2021 were remote regulatory audits.
Wow.
Almost 30% of all of the inspections. Okay. And yes, I was choosing the first 10. Yeah. As I'm always using. I'm not grabbing the entire, list. But yes, 27%, you're going to say, oh my goodness, almost a third of all of the audits were remote. Well, guess what? When the FDA start looking at, oh my goodness, and they're raising the most typical nonconformity, FSBP nonconformity, Bryan, since 2018 has been you do not have an FSBP program according to the requirements of the regulation. Why they are so successful? Because you're doing this online.
Yep. And when you look at the observations that FDA has written for fiscal year 2022, which is now closed out, it was almost 800 observations. And the number 2 place for FSVP was only 100, right? And then you had your sanitary programs and things like this. So FDA is very, very focused on FSBP. And they see now, it's like, oh, okay, because of COVID, we had to do a lot of these things this way. We were able to put together a program and we're happy with how it works. So under the law, again, right, Congress said, FDA, you have to do so many audits, right? And it ramps up and up and up. And FDA has been going, oh, we don't have enough people to do this and complaining and we need money. And they've found a way forward now. Yeah. And you can expect more of this. It's coming.
Bryan, I mean, if you need to audit someone remotely, can you perform, I don't know, I'm going to say 2 or 3 of these or maybe 5 at the same time? Yes, you can do it. It's just paperwork.
Yeah.
You request the paperwork or in 5 facilities, and then you go by one by one, checking the documentation, and then you reply. You can do this. Oh my goodness, the efficiency, it's increased significantly.
Right. And now you can, instead of sending out, let's say that you have some brand new investigators who are inexperienced and you're Glenn and you're like, oh, I can't send this person out on their own. Bryan doesn't know what he's doing on these audits yet. So I need to pair him up with Jose, who is an experienced FDA investigator, to go out and perform this. Now I'm using 2 resources versus, let's say there are inexperienced personnel. There's me and there's 4 other people who don't really know what we're doing. If those are remote, you can manage all of those, right? It's like, hey, Bryan, I want you to call this firm, and Sally, I want you to call this firm, and da, da, da. And when you're done, or if you have any questions, bring me the reports, and then I'll go through the information and see how you did.
Yep. 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 That's exactly right. Okay.
So this is a big watch out.
Big watch out.
Yes, and you need to prepare for this. And because like this Friday, right, the day after Thanksgiving here in the US, where are most people? Right? The offices aren't there, right? This is when the problems happen, and this is when the phone call comes. And if you're the QA manager and there's no one else around, what do you do? Right?
Yeah.
Everybody else is celebrating, and you're holding down the fort while FDA calls. It's like, uh-oh, right?
Yeah.
It's like I said at the beginning, it always happens at the wrong time. So for the FSVP, right, they have a really, really good model on this. And I have a story to share for one of my clients, and this is really is like, wow, right? Because this happened to them. Mm-hmm. So they're a US company and they manufacture in Canada. And so they're dealing with FSV quite a bit. So the product is manufactured in Toronto, like most food companies, right? And then it comes into the US over the border there. So of course, then foreign supplier verification kicks in. And they got a call from FDA, from a consumer safety officer, not an investigator, a CSO out of San Diego, right? So consumer safety officers work in the division that deals with imports and these type of things. And exactly what you said, Jose, it's like, hi, this is FDA and we're doing a foreign supplier verification inspection.
Yes.
Right. So then it took, of course, a little bit to get to the right person. And then they started asking a whole lot of questions. And where did they get their questions from? From the database, right? The Customs Border Protection database, where everything is listed, right? It's like, okay, here is my import code. Here's my product code category, et cetera, et cetera. Mm. They just started going through those things and saying, okay, well, according to this, you imported this. We want to see the documentation. Have you done we want to know how you're verifying food safety compliance, et cetera, et cetera. And under FSVP, when FDA makes that request, you have 24 hours to get that documentation to them.
Yep. And
that's
exactly right.
Yes. And so here's what we learned from this as well, is when we started looking at the broker documentation, because the plant in Toronto, which was a co-manufacturer, had their broker, because in Toronto, right, like most companies, right, most of what they manufacture there comes to the US. And so they had their own broker that this was all done through. And they saw the documentation. We didn't at that point in time. And there was lots of mistakes, right? So they were putting in wrong product categories. They would say, okay, well, it shows here that you're importing a juice product. No, we don't do, no, there's no juice product. So we were finding mistakes. And yes. And so get this. They were the importer of record, right? Because they were bringing the products in to the US on our behalf. We were running R&D trials at this company. And there was an R&D trial that was canceled. And it's like, oh, we're not going to do the trial. And so we shipped the ingredients back into the US. What did this company now become? The importer of record. We were, not the co-man, us, because we brought it back into the country. And FDA is like, okay, well, where's your evaluation for this? Because we see one of these ingredients comes from Spain. Oh, right. So we had the documentation and stuff like that, but we didn't even think about it, right? So now it's just like, uh-oh. And one of the things that they didn't do, right, is because this was a trial, this was R&D material, right? It wasn't for sale. It has to be labeled, right? For R&D use evaluation only. It wasn't labeled. And they got a 483 for that.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and at this Washington State conference, the regional director was at the conference and she gave a presentation. I talked with her about this afterwards, because that seemed like a very, very small thing to write a 483 for, right? And she said, no, that's what we're doing. Yep,
that makes sense.
Yeah. So big lesson that we learned from this. So are we now checking all of the border documentation from the brokerage house? Yes. Right. Yeah. Are we making sure that if we bring anything back into the US directly ourselves, Are we covering off on that? Oh yeah, right?
Yep.
So anybody who is listening to this, go out there and check that information. If you are bringing things into the country in any capacity, right? So if you are doing true foreign supplier verification, right, where you are bringing the materials in, and these weird things that can happen behind the scenes that you don't really think about, you need to pay close attention to this because FDA is really focusing in.
Yep. I agree 100%. One thing that I'm going to add, kind of as a point to make a significant and very important point about this conversation that we're having right now, Bryan, is that everybody that is importing food into the United States needs to be extremely clear that the FDA is going to hold the FSBP importer as the responsible for the safety of the products of importation. Is not anymore the supplier.
Yep, the importer of record.
Yep. No, not the importer of record. That is custom. The FSBP importer. There are two different figures.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there are two different figures. And yes, at some point, the importer of record could be the FSBP importer, but they could be separated because the FSBP importer must be located in the United States and the importer of record could be located outside the United States. That's fundamentally the difference.
Yeah, and as FDA has said in the past, when they go to check on that, if those records are wrong, that really upsets them, right? Because they're wasting time.
Yes, that's right. And it's a requirement. So if it's a requirement, there is no reason why people are not have those records for them.
Yeah. So you need to really understand that, right? So as Glenn said, right, to kind of summarize what we've been talking about so far, right? FDA has new tools. They have this voluntary program. They're ramping up audits to get back to where they need to be. And when you look at the charts of that, right, it's doing this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
In my case, Bryan, even though that it was not part of Glenn's conversation, it is part of the classes, the regulatory classes I'm teaching. FDA now has the power to take the registration number of these companies. And in the case of FSBP, an import alert was open just for the lack of effective implementation of FSBP. So people that is importing, the FSBP importer, can be placed into the red import alert 99-41. Oh my goodness. And to get out of that import alert red list, it's a huge task.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think they've set it up to be deliberately not easy to do, right? Because in the past, before this, companies that were importing things in the US that may have had some issues, right, would port shop, right? So they would go to San Diego and it would be rejected. And they would just take the ship and sail up the coast and go to the next port, right? And hoping to get it in that way. And that's all, right? FDA has stopped all of that, which is good.
Gone. Yes. Yes.
So yeah, if you're looking at FSBP, if this impacts you in any way, even if you think it may, right, because sometimes there's hidden things behind the scenes, you need to understand this. And from conversations with the broker relative to this program, they viewed our questions when we were going through this FSBP audit as an annoyance, right? It's like, right? So that's a big warning flag, right? Your broker needs to understand this as well as you do or better. Right. And if you don't have confidence in that, you have some risk.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
Check that out. So good. That was great information from Glenn. Oh, by the way, at the end of the chat here today, I have the link for Glenn's presentation and I'll put it in here so that you have access to this. Right. And that's the type of information that we share in locals as well. So if you're thinking about joining a food safety community for free, right, it doesn't cost anything to join. Join us, right? I post pretty much twice, 2 or 3 times a week. I'll go through recalls and post the recalls that are interesting, right? To me, I know, what's going on in food and things like this, all these crazy things like, enoki mushrooms, right? Always listeria with the enoki mushrooms. You don't eat enoki mushrooms, please. They have lots and lots of problems. So pay close attention to that as well. So there was another one on this list here, Jose, that kind of caught my attention too, that from this conference was the Christopher Smith, the acting senior advisor for policy, and he gave an update on smarter era of food safety, right, which we've been hearing a ton about. Any comments on that for the group here?
I mean, it was a quick, short presentation. It was I will say that is a reminder. FDA kind of wants to remind people that even though that all of those things in the smarter area of food safety are not regulations, that is the scope of all of the regulations, and that is the push of the FDA on those regulations. That's what, in my opinion, was significant about his comments. Yeah. And yes, in the pillar of the traceability records, additional traceability records rule was just released. We're going to briefly talk about that in a few minutes. It was just released, and he basically ended up explaining a little bit about the traceability of records.
Right. And that's definitely why I wanted to talk about this, because I think this is an area that's going to be huge, right? And FDA is really excited about this, right? Because this has been a sore spot for them. So just so everybody's kind of aware, what is enhanced traceability, right? So this is my perspective on it. We'll see if you agree with this, Jose, is that FDA has a very difficult time in the past conducting recalls, because we as an industry, when we look at traceability, everybody knows the phrase one forward, one back, right? We will do mock recalls internally. Oh, okay, let's make sure that we have the right lot codes for our ingredients for this product. And can we trace where the product goes next in the supply chain? So it goes to this warehouse, or we ship it to this retailer. Did we find all the product? Yes. Yay, right? Okay, we're done. What happened? That is one tiny little portion of the supply chain. And when you look at the pictures of when FDA would present this, right? Okay, you've got producers of materials in other countries, which go to aggregators, which go to importers, which go on ships, which go to ports, and then all of these things happen after we manufacture, where it goes to distributors and warehouses and jobbers and retailers and e-commerce and you name it, right? Extremely complex. Well, where did the complaints come from? The consumer, right? So the consumer, drinks their coffee and goes, oh my goodness, I got sick from my coffee. Now FDA's got to try and go back through that spider web to figure out who actually made that and who is the responsible person. And this can take a lot of time. And FDA gets criticism for this, right? And they're like, oh, okay, well, we need to fix this. We need to go from that retail, jump over all those middlemen, because they have no impact on food safety, essentially, right? If they're doing, controlling refrigeration and whatever. So sanitary transport was created for that, right? But not a whole lot has happened with that. And they jump over that back to the manufacturer. So FDA, with enhanced traceability, has said, we need to go directly to that manufacturer as quickly as possible. And we have record requirements for them of what we want to see.
Yeah, that's right. So that was more or less the outcome of his quick presentation. And then this, after that one, Bryan, the other thing that is significant, according to our agenda, is the update of the training material and the training sessions. So FDA is working on the hazards guidance. The guidance is going to be updated. The one that is already appendix number 1 for the hazard is being updated. So that is a good news. That is good help. Actually, it's an extremely good material guidance document. Extremely good. Something that I don't have in my notes, but I remember, is that FDA is also working. Hopefully, they're going to be published this year in a lot of different chapters of the guidance book for the preventive control for human food. If you go now to that manual, which is supposed to be the one accompanying the manual of the class, if you look at that, the table of contents, you're going to find coming soon, chapter whatever, the 11, 12, 13, right? Coming soon. Right. Seems that they're working on it, and seems that we're going to have those chapters released very soon. So that's another extra comment.
So coming soon is coming soon.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, because it's been a while. I think, let me see. I have, yes, here's mine. So, I mean, when you look at, right, so here's the big book, right?
That
So
that
this
is
was,
the training manual,
yeah,
Brian. What they're working on is the other one, is the one that is going to accompany the training manual,
the
not that
guys.
one.
Okay, got
Yes,
it.
that one, the one that you have on your hand, is the one that is going to be changed. And I have my next comments are about that to share with you and with everybody here, which are those changes. So number two, as a point, I have the new Spanish version of the manual was released, the 1.2, version 1.2. And then the new structure of the class, and let me roll these up. So FDA is going to join, FSPCA is going to join chapter number 1 and 2 into chapter number 1.
Oh, good.
Okay. So they are going to basically, they said that they actually remove a lot of redundancy in those chapters. So they group all together. Chapter number 2 is going to now become the GMPs. And remember that in the preventive control for human or animal food regulation, the GMPs are not the main objective of the class. It's just to is a reminder, guys, you need to work under sanitary conditions, so you also need to prevent filth. And these are some of the things that you can do to maintain those sanitary conditions. Mm-hmm. Then chapter number 3 is going to be the same biological hazards class that we have before. Chapter number 4 is going to be exactly the same physical, chemical, and environmental, not environmental, economically motivated adulteration hazard. Chapter number 5 remains as the preliminary steps. Chapter number 6 is going to be the hazard analysis. Chapter number 7, preventive controls overview. So FDA is going to say, these are the preventive controls that we want you to have. So that is going to take you to chapter number 8, which is going to be the process preventive controls. Remember that is exactly the same as a CCP. And in chapter number 8, there is a quick conversation about critical control points. Because the scope, which is what I'm going now, all of these changes are because FDA and FSPCA, FDA, they want the regulation, the training about the regulation to be identified as a HACCP-based training. So in the case that anyone is going to thinking of starting a bakery, they don't need to take HACCP class and then PCQI or vice versa. Just by taking PCQI, they're done.
Oh, okay, that's good. So yeah, so that applies to all the categories, like seafood and things like that too, or
no. Only those that are responsible for implementation of 117. Okay. Preventing control for human food.
So the carve outs that are in place now for like low acid canned foods and juice and seafood, those are all
that remains 108, 114, 113, whatever regulation that still it's in place.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Okay, good.
So chapter number 9 is going to be the critical limits, principle number 3, monitoring, principle number 4, corrective actions, principle number 5, and then chapter 10 is the verification and the monitoring, and most likely it's going to be the reassessment of the program only for the process preventive controls / CCPs.
Got it. Okay.
And that's how they are saying this class is a HACCP-based class.
Nice.
Okay.
I think that's a good move.
I think that it's clever. I mean, if you ask me, I have been teaching this class in 2016, telling everybody this is based on HACCP, and this is the structure of HACCP. Mm-hmm. However, they made a few changes just to be recognized, and I said, okay, doesn't matter. So chapter number 11 is going to be the food allergen preventive controls. 12 is the sanitation preventive controls. 13, the supply chain preventive controls. And then 14 is going to be now the food safety plan management, verification, and training. It was removed from the other sections. And then 15 remains as the recall plan. And then 16 is an overview of the regulation. That's more or less the new structure.
Cool. Did they give any timing on when they expect to do this? Or?
supposed to be ready by now, something like that. They are going to start teaching new classes. Those that develop the materials are going to be teacher classes in order to test how the class goes, to see if the time matches more or less the same. And after that, they say that by the first quarter of next year, the new curriculum is going to be ready. So the instructors, most likely, because it's not defined yet, but most likely will need to take I don't want to say a refresher training, but it's a training in order to learn the new structure and blah, blah, blah. And most likely it's going to be virtual.
Got it.
But it's just about the structure, because, I mean, in theory, we know exactly what's covered by the rule.
Gotcha. And so just so everybody's clear, because they may not know this background, is that so for the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance, will create this material, and then they train lead instructors, and then the lead instructors will go out and train people on how to do these activities, like train the trainer type thing. And so they're going to then teach those guys, and then they will teach everybody else. So I'm a PCQI, Preventive Control Qualified Individual, so I've gone through the course and all these type of things. Are they going to, did anybody ask if they're going to have to go back and requalify, or if you're, okay.
No, they said that if you are PCQI, you are PCQI. If you wish to take the new class, well, that's fine. But whomever already received the certificate, they say they're done, because the original curriculum includes, even though that is not spelled, the 7 principles of food safety, which is HACCP-based.
Gotcha. Okay.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Was there any discussion of doing this remotely or in person? Personally, I prefer in person, right? Because then you can interact with other people. And
you mean teaching of the instructors about the new material?
Well, I mean, yeah, generally. So for the new instructors, I would imagine that's probably not going to be remote. But also, as they begin exporting this out into the marketplace, are they going to do more remote work, more virtual conferences like this?
Well, let me tell you one thing, Bryan. As long as I understand, some instructors are getting trained remotely.
Okay.
Yes. And in this case, for the changes, what I understood is that we are going to there will be some dates for the refresher. I don't want to say, maybe refresher is not the right word, for the training on how to teach the new curriculum. Let's put it like that.
Okay.
Okay. And that in theory is going to be virtual. And as soon as we got the I don't know, the approval or the okay or something like that, yes, you are fine with this, we can start using the new curriculum.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Well, obviously, I mean, yeah, when you look at, the training, there's a lot of work, right? So
yeah.
So I'm glad that they're doing that. And any other lessons come out of the conference? Or?
What was that?
Oh, I was just asking anything else that stuck out from the conference?
Just one more thing. The FSPCA, the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance, is looking for our opinion on having as an option a certification program. Because right now, anyone that is taking the class is not certified. It's just someone that took the class. So for certification, they're looking to have a test that is dedicated just for that content. So if you want to get a certificate and you can say, well, I'm certified, there will be another steps for those that willingly decide to go that way. That's quite interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
Good. They're growing and evolving, and the people at the FSPCA, right? They pulled together, academics and FDA and industry, right? So they've done a really, really good job of putting together a coalition of people who know what they're doing, right? So everybody has a seat at the table, and they're all looking at these type of things. So I think that's part of the reason too why this has been so successful.
Yep. And that is going to basically take us, Bryan, in the last minutes that we have, to the actual additional traceability records rule. In this case, I mean, I briefly went through it, Brian. I'm still too new to give you a detailed overview. But what I can tell you is that this is a quick summary. So FDA developed something that is called, what was the name? I want to give you the exact name. Is risk ranking model.
Uh-huh.
And that risk ranking model, which is part of FSMA, is the way that the FDA has to determine what is a high risk food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there are 7 different criteria for each of the food. And well, you just need to, according to their own scoring and their own rubrics and whatever, they assign the scores, and then they have an algorithm, and the algorithm calculates whatever is the risk rank.
Gotcha. Now, is this the tool then, Jose, that they used when they created the enhanced traceability guidance document?
I'm not sure. That's a very good question. I'm not sure, Brian. But this is the one that they're using for the food traceability, additional traceability records. Okay. So why? Because they need to first define what is a food that is high risk. And then according to the outcome of that risk ranking number, FDA is going to create a food traceability list, FTL. Uh-huh. And this list is the one that contains the cheese and the fish and the oysters and the clams and fruits and vegetables and whatever. A lot of things are there. Why? Because they're all high risk. Mm-hmm. Super high risk. Okay? So whenever someone in the food chain from the beginning, from farms, from fishing vessels, and from the first receiver of the fishing vessels, and so on, because it's applicable to all of the products in that food traceability list, identify that you are dealing with one of those products in the food traceability list, you are required to keep certain documents depending on the activities that you perform. Yeah. That's a summary. So these activities are called critical tracking events, CTEs. And some of the CTEs, I don't have them all here, harvesting, cooling of some of the products in farms, and then the initial packing of the raw material, and then shipping, receiving, and transforming. Okay, mm-hmm. Those are the tracking events. For each tracking event that is applicable to you, you need to maintain the records that are required for each and every single tracking event. And the rule defines which are those records. They are being called, reference documents. You need to make sure that you have those reference documents. And one of the things that I was just finishing reading before getting with you in the chat this morning is that FDA is asking people to have all of this information in an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh,
yes. Oh, yes. So you will need to have for example, the customer name, which is going to be the receiver of the product when harvesting, the commodity and the variety, the quantity and the unit of measure, the GPS coordinates of the field in the farm where you pull that product, date of harvesting, and the reference document and reference document number. Most likely that one, and I'm guessing right now, I'm taking a good guess, is going to be the Excel spreadsheet that needs to be kept. Why? Because once the harvester collects all of that information and ships the product, the harvester is responsible to go to the shipping requirements, because shipping is a critical tracking event. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, so what was the traceability lot that was assigned to the product from that field? And if you assign more than one, well, which are they? And then the quantity and the unit of measures and product description, the location description for immediate subsequent, and so on. I'm not going into the detail, but a lot of things. So when this person the harvester is shipping the product into the market, they need to keep all of the key data elements for the harvesting, if they have cooling, for the cooling, and then everything that is related with the shipping. And that data is going to be transmitted to the next one, to the one that is receiving the product, which is not the transportation company, as you can guess. Transportation company is going to be there just to make sure that they maintain the product under the right condition, and that's it.
Right.
So their receiver has some, because receiving is a critical tracking event, the receiver needs to collect the information necessary according to who is the shipper. And let's say that person is a warehousing distribution center. They store, and because they do not need to change anything, they just ship. When they ship, because the products are in the food traceability list, they need to comply with all of the shipping requirements of the ship critical tracking event. But if it's a company and is making food, some of the ingredients that you're purchasing could be part of the food traceability list, but some may not. So for those that are part of your product, according to the food traceability list, you need to keep everything because you are going to be transforming. And when you transform, you need to keep all of the records coming in, everything that you did, and then the shipping of the record, just because one or two or three of the ingredients were part of the food traceability list. It's a challenge. It's going to be a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I think we can see too, what is FDA doing with this, right? It gets back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Is they want to be able to go quickly from the point of sale, from a retail location where a consumer has a complaint of illness, immediately back to the record keepers, right? For the key tracking elements, so that they can then skip through all that and say, okay, here's all the records. We know exactly where this came from. We know what the lot number is. We know how much is involved, and we can begin our investigation, right? Yep. Like that.
Like this.
And so what they're doing is they've said the industry practice, which has gone on forever, of viewing things as, okay, here's my little world, right? I bring in stuff, I do things to it, and I ship stuff out. That's all I have to worry about. Nope, gone. You have to look at the entire supply chain now. So there's going to be a lot coming on this.
For those of us, Bryan, that read the law, the regulation, and the laws, and blah blah blah, and I'm scared to death when I see written in the regulation, require record. Oh my goodness, when you see the word require, those documents belong to the FDA, and you need to do whatever it takes to keep those records.
Right. And to your point earlier, right, if you're not doing that and they yank your registration number, you're done.
Done. Yes.
You cannot.
And it's one of the powers that they have.
Yeah. So
I don't think that is going to be the first approach. You're most likely are going to receive a 483 warning letter, maybe an injunction, or something very serious. And again, if the persons are not doing anything, I'm expecting that in the future, FDA is going to be pulling the registration of people.
Right. And this is a perfect example, right? We'll bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level of you need to stay on top of these things. And, being here on this Friday and joining us and seeing things real time as we're understanding these as well is critical. Because if you wait until the last minute and say, this isn't effective until 2026, we'll be fine. Big mistake, right? So step number one is being aware, starting to get a better understanding, right? It's what we're doing, right? We're going to conferences and understanding this information. And then you need to start educating inside your company of, whoa, big change coming. Yep. We need to start getting ready and practicing these things, right? So with that, right, super important. So obviously with this topic, right, this is going to be a focus, and we're going to be talking about this more in the future. You can bet right here on the chat that we're going to be talking about this a lot, because this has a major impact on how we do things. Just like the FSVP, right? FDA kind of had this educate before regulate period, right? We'll have some of that, but to your point, Jose, whenever you see things that say required, right, that means FDA is serious. So heads up, it's coming. So any upcoming classes or education, Jose, that you have on your schedule that you'd like people to know about?
Okay, so I'm not sure if there will be time for registration right now, but I'm going to Phoenix um, to attend a conference in, what was that, 12, 13, and 14 of December, something like that. But it's a legal conference. It's a full legal and regulatory conference. And actually, next year, Bryan, one of the things that I'm really planning on doing is to become, I don't want to say a paralegal in food, but I'm kind of think of myself of someone that can provide help understanding laws and regulation, because believe me, in the future, Bryan, I can see this already. If you don't understand the regulation and the system that people is developing or not in compliance with the regulation, people is done.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I was doing lately in the latest, I taught 3 SQF classes basically in a row. 2 for storage and distribution, 1 for 1 for packaging material, and 1 for manufacturing. And when I was teaching the class, at some point I said, okay, guys, this is a system. These are the elements. The elements need to be connected. And this is what is required by SQF. And this is what is required by the FDA. And guess what? FDA requires that you have a pest control program. SQF requires that you have pest prevention. The name may be a little bit different, but I mean, at the end, it's the same. Now, when you read at the requirements, at the specific requirement for that element, those are the ones that may not be the same, Bryan. And I believe that in the past, when SQF and IFS and BRC hire lawyers to compare the FDA with their own codes, the lawyers went all the way to the elements, but they never went through the details of the requirements. Look at this one that I remember because I taught the class last week. Now, actually, Monday and Tuesday of this week. So in pest control, according to the FDA, you may have dogs for pest control in your facility. It's written in the regulation. Now, you go to SQF, and there is a requirement saying no animals are allowed in the facility. At that point, SQF is more strict than the FDA. But if I go back to any of the approved suppliers or the recall program, the recall is huge. Both SQF and FDA, and when I'm saying SQF, any of the GFSI, they require, well, you need to have a team, and the team is responsible for identifying any food that you are sending. That's exactly the same. But then you go through the details. FDA is asking people to try to identify what kind of classification is the food that they ship to the market. That is not required by GFSI.
No.
No, it's not. So they require to have a to determine the scope of the recall. And you're going to say that if you read the GFSI codes, that is more or less embedded. But the strategy that you're going to use to recall the product is fundamentally required by the FDA, but not necessarily defined exactly by GFSI.
Interesting. Well, more food for thought for sure. So as you can tell, right, Jose is an excellent teacher. And so if you're looking at taking some courses, reach out to him. His email's right there. And definitely, I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of sitting in on his courses, and he's an amazing instructor. So definitely, if you want to learn more about these topics, Jose is the guy to talk about. Because one of the things in quality that you learn as you advance in your career is that what we do is very close to legal, right? I work a lot with lawyers, right? So we need to understand how lawyers think as well as they need to understand how we think, which I'll give a final piece of advice on that to kind of close out our talk, is if your company doesn't have on retainer or in the company a food safety lawyer, you need one. Don't rely on lawyers with other specialties because they have other expertises. You need someone who understands food law and how to apply it. So super important. So with that, Jose, we'll close out our chat today. Fantastic chat again. Thank you, sir. I love having you on. And we will be back here next Friday again for our next food safety chat. So again, live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And we'll talk about our next food safety chat. So we will see you back here next week, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Continue growing as we are with food safety, right? That's what's so fun about what we do, right? Is it's not static. It's constantly changing and growing, and you need to keep up with it and accept that challenge if you're going to be successful. So we applaud your efforts and the fact that you're here. So thank you for joining us and improving your knowledge and allowing us to talk with you. So have a great weekend, everyone. Jose, have a good weekend as well, my friend. Everybody, great having you here. See you next week.
My pleasure. Thank you, Bryan.